The galaxy had been quiet for 3,000 years. Every morning, the same ships arrived at the same ports. Every species followed the same rules their ancestors had followed. The Valdari, ancient and wise, sat in their crystal towers and watched over everything. They had built the perfect system. No wars, no chaos, no surprises. Admiral Kethve floated in his command center high above Nexus Prime, the capital world of their great empire. Through the clear walls of his chamber, he could see the daily tribute ceremony happening far below. It was always the same. The blue-skinned Zephyrians would arrive first with their weather machines. Then came the Silver Corvin carrying their thinking computers. Last were the insect-like Vek, moving together like one giant creature, bringing their hive mind calculators. Each species had their job. Each individual knew their place. The Valdari had spent centuries carefully organizing every race in the galaxy into perfect roles. The strong species became workers. The smart ones became computers. The creative ones became artists, but only the kind of art that was approved. Nobody questioned this system because questioning was not allowed. Catch-VA checked his daily reports. Production was up 3% on the mining worlds. The weather control systems were running smoothly. The tribute ships were arriving exactly on schedule. Everything was perfect, just like yesterday, just like tomorrow would be. Then the alarms started screaming. The sound was so unusual that Kethve almost didn't recognize it. When had the emergency systems last been used? Not in his lifetime. Not in his father's lifetime. The crystal walls of his chamber began flashing red, a color that hurt his ancient eyes. "Report," commanded, his voice carrying through the chamber's communication system. "Admiral, we have detected an unknown vessel approaching from the outer rim," came the voice of his assistant, a young Valdari named Saken. "It's broadcasting on frequencies we've never seen before. The mathematics don't match any of our physics models." Kethve felt something he had not experienced in centuries: confusion. "Show me." The walls of his chamber shifted, displaying the image from their most powerful sensors. The ship was small, barely large enough to hold a crew of 50 beings. Its design was crude, almost primitive compared to the sleek vessels of the Concordat. Pipes and cables ran along its outer hull where they should have been hidden inside. Strange markings covered its surface, not the clean, logical symbols used by civilized species, but rough, chaotic designs that seemed to have no pattern. "How did it get here?" Kethve asked. "Our sensors show no jump signatures, no fold space. Distortions. It's as if it simply appeared." "The vessel appears to have traveled through normal space," Admiral Sakeni replied, her voice uncertain, "but the distance from the rim. It would take our fastest ships 300 years to make that journey. Impossible. No species has that kind of technology." "Admiral, there's more. The ship is not responding to our standard greeting protocols. We've sent the usual welcome message in all known languages, but they're not acknowledging our authority." Kethve felt his crystalline features hardening. In 3,000 years of perfect order, no ship had ever failed to respond to Concordat authority. When vessels approached their territory, they immediately submitted to scanning, classification, and assignment of proper roles. It was the natural order of things. "Send a priority message," he ordered. "Tell them they will submit to classification, or be destroyed." "We've tried that, Admiral," they responded with unusual transmissions. The chamber's walls flickered again, this time displaying strange symbols that seemed to dance and shift. The universal translators. Machines that had successfully decoded the languages of over 10,000 species struggled with these markings. Letters appeared and disappeared as the computers tried to make sense of the alien writing. Slowly, one word began to form clearly on the display. It was unlike any word in any civilized language, harsh, simple, almost primitive in its construction. But as the translators worked, its meaning became clear: humanity. Kethve stared at the word. It meant nothing to him. In all his centuries of study, in all the vast databases of the Concordat, he had never encountered this term. "What does it mean? Unknown, Admiral? Translators are still working on it. But Admiral... there's something else." The ship is accelerating toward our territory, and it's not alone. The display shifted again, showing a wider view of space. Behind the first vessel, barely visible at the edge of sensor range, more ships were approaching. Dozens of them, all with the same crude design, all bearing the same strange markings. They're not responding to any of our communications, Sekeni continued. They're not following any known flight patterns. They're just ... coming. Kethve felt something cold settle in his ancient heart. For 3,000 years, the Concordat had maintained perfect order because every species understood their place. Every being knew the rules. Every ship that approached their territory came seeking to join their perfect system. These ships were different. They carried something the galaxy had not seen in millennia, the unknown. And with the unknown came the most dangerous thing of all. The possibility that their perfect order was not as perfect as they had believed. The word. Humanity continued to pulse on the display, and Kethvia realized that they're perfectly ordered. Galaxy was about to meet something it had never encountered before. Chaos incarnate. Captain Minho stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the stars through the main window. He had dreamed of this moment since he was a child, the first human to meet aliens from another world. Earth had sent their fastest ship into the unknown, hoping to find friends among the stars. The journey had taken months, but they had finally detected signs of a great civilization. The ship's computers were going crazy with incoming signals. Dozens of different frequencies, all perfectly organized, all speaking in mathematical harmony. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. This was not the chaotic radio chatter of Earth. This was something far more advanced. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," said Lieutenant Yeji from her position at the communications console. "It's strange, multiple species are speaking at once, but they're all saying the same thing." The main screen flickered to life, showing something that made Minho's jaw drop. 12 different alien species stood in perfect formation, each one more incredible than the last. There were beings made of crystal that sparkled like diamonds. Others looked like living metal, their surfaces reflecting the light. Some had wings that shimmered with colors humans had no names for, but what struck Minho most was how they moved. Every gesture was perfectly timed. When one being raised its hand, the others did the same. When one stepped forward, they all stepped forward. It was like watching a dance performed by creatures from different worlds. "Greetings, newcomers," they said in unison, their voices somehow blending into one perfect sound. "We welcome you too. Assume your designated position within the eternal order. Your species will be evaluated and assigned its optimal function within our great civilization." Minho looked around at his crew. His engineer Taeyun was staring at the screen with his mouth open. Navigator Soyen was frantically taking notes. Communications officer Yeji was trying to record everything. They'd all expected to meet aliens. But nothing like this. Thank you for the welcome," Minho said, stepping forward. "I'm Captain Minho of the United Earthship Defiance. We're explorers from a planet called Earth. We've come to meet you and learn about your civilization." The 12 beings tilted their heads in perfect synchronization. "Your gratitude is noted. Please prepare for classification. Your species will be scanned, evaluated, and assigned its proper role. This is how all species join the eternal order." Minho felt something cold in his stomach. Assigned. "We're not here to be assigned anything. We're here to explore, to learn, to maybe make some friends. We want to choose our own path." The silence that followed was the loudest thing Minho had ever heard. The alien beings stood perfectly still, their eyes fixed on him, for almost 5 seconds. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. It was as if the entire universe had stopped breathing. Finally, one of the crystal beings stepped forward. Its body was made of living diamond, beautiful and cold. When it spoke, its voice was like wind chimes. In a gentle breeze. "I am Ambassador Velthani of the Galactic Concordat. I believe there has been a misunderstanding. Choice is not efficient. Order is eternal. Your species will be evaluated and assigned its optimal function. This is how civilization works." Minho smiled. It was the same smile his ancestors had worn when they told kings they wanted to rule themselves, the same smile humans had shown when they decided to fly to the moon just because they could. Ambassador, I think you're the one who's misunderstood. We didn't travel across the galaxy to be told what to do. We came here to explore, to learn, to meet new friends, and share ideas. Friends? The word seemed to confuse the alien beings. They looked at each other, their perfect coordination breaking for just a moment. This concept is unknown. Species serve functions. Order is maintained. What is the purpose of these friends? The purpose. Minho laughed. There doesn't have to be a purpose. Sometimes you do things just because they make you happy. Sometimes you help others just because it's the right thing to do. Sometimes you break rules just because the rules are stupid. Engineer Taeon stepped up beside his captain. Sir, they seem to have a very organized society. Maybe we should consider their offer. Minho looked at his friend and shook his head. Taeon, our ancestors spent thousands of years fighting for the right to choose their own destiny. They died in wars and revolutions just so we could stand here today and say no to anyone who tries to tell us what to do. I'm not about to give that up now. He turned back to the ambassador. Look, Velthani, I'm sure your system works great for you. But we're humans. We're messy, chaotic, and we don't like being told what to do. We've been dealing with stubborn bureaucrats for thousands of years, and we're pretty good at it by now. The crystal being's surface began to dim. Your words make no sense. Chaos is destructive. Order is life. Without proper classification, your species will disrupt the harmony of the galaxy. Minho's smile grew wider. Buddy, you have no idea what you're dealing with. We're the species that looked at fire and decided to play with it. We're the ones who saw the ocean and decided to sail across it. We looked at the sky and decided to fly. And now we've looked at the stars and decided to visit them. If you think we're going to quietly accept being assigned a role in your perfect little system, you don't know humans at all. The ambassador's crystalline features seemed to darken. This is unprecedented. No species has ever refused classification. Well, Minho said, there's a first time for everything. The trouble started with music. Commander Ji-hoon had brought a small collection of Earth's cultural archives with him on the trading mission. He thought it would be a nice gesture to share some human art with their new alien friends. He had no idea he was about to cause the biggest crisis in galactic history. The first species to hear human jazz were the Korvan. They were silver-skinned beings with large heads, bred for thousands of years to be perfect computers. Their emotions had been removed long ago, so they could think clearly and solve complex problems for the Concordat. They lived in quiet rooms, processing data all day, never questioning their role. When young Corvin named Zix-42 first heard Miles Davis playing trumpet, something strange happened in his mind. The music had no pattern he could understand. It changed without warning. It broke its own rules. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. This is incorrect, Zix-42 said to his work partner, X-91. The sound patterns make no mathematical sense, but they make me feel ... something. Vex-91 stopped her calculations and listened. The music was flowing through their communication systems, wild and free. For the first time in her life, she felt something that wasn't logic. It was warm and made her want to move. I don't understand it either, she whispered, but I want to hear more. Within days, young Corvin across the galaxy were abandoning their assigned work to listen to human music. They began making their own sounds, experimenting with noise and rhythm. Their supervisors were horrified to find them creating art instead of processing data. The Vec were having an even stranger experience. They were insect-like beings who had lived as one giant mind for millions of years. Every Vec thought the same thoughts, felt the same feelings, and knew the same facts. They moved together like parts of one enormous creature. But humans kept talking about something called individual choice. They told stories about people who disagreed with their families, who chose their own jobs, who even changed their names. The concept was impossible for the Vec to understand, till some of them started to want it. Worker Vec 7439 was the first to separate from the hive mind. One morning, She simply stopped sharing her thoughts with the collective. She sat alone in her work chamber, experiencing her own private ideas for the first time. I am me, she said to herself, tasting the strange new concept. I am not us. I am me. The sensation spread like a disease through the Vec colonies. Individual Vec began stepping away from the group, discovering personal desires and private thoughts. Some wanted to see different colors. Others wanted to taste new foods. A few even wanted to be called by individual names instead of numbers. The hegemony's leaders watched in horror as their perfect workers began thinking for themselves. But the most dangerous thing the humans brought was their stories. Human trader Sung-Ho loved telling tales about Earth's history. He would sit in alien bars and cafes, surrounded by curious listeners, talking about the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the fall of kings and emperors. You see, he would say, we used to have kings too. They told us we were born to serve them, that it was the natural order. But then we decided we didn't want kings anymore, so we got rid of them. The alien listeners would gasp. You can do that? Can choose your own leaders? Of course we call it democracy. Everyone gets to vote for who they want to be in charge. And if those leaders do a bad job, we vote them out and get new ones. Ideas spread faster than any virus. Species that had never questioned their assigned roles began asking dangerous questions. Why did they have to serve the hegemony, who decided their place in the galaxy? What if they wanted something different? On the mining world of Kepler-7, the Zephyrian workers stopped their atmospheric processing duties and held their first election. They chose their own leaders and announced they would only work for themselves from now on. The Valdari ruling council was meeting in emergency session every day. Admiral HFY paced back and forth in his crystal chamber, his ancient features twisted with worry. Reports are coming in from across the galaxy, he announced to the council. Productivity is down 60%. 12 species have declared independence from their assigned roles. The Corvon have formed something they call jazz clubs instead of doing their computational work. The Ek are experiencing what they call the dissolution. Individual members are refusing to return to the collective mind. Councilmember Sithra raised her crystalline hand. How is this possible? Our system has worked perfectly for 3,000 years, the humans, HFY said, his voice filled with disgust. They're like a virus, spreading their chaos wherever they go. They talk about freedom and choice and individual rights. They tell stories about overthrowing authority and choosing their own destiny. These ideas are destroying everything we've built. What do they want from us? Asked another council member. Nothing, HFY replied, and that was the most terrifying part. They don't want to conquer us or rule us. They just want to be left alone to make their own choices. They're teaching everyone else to want the same thing. The Admiral looked out at the galaxy beyond his chamber walls. For the first time in millennia, ships were moving in unscheduled patterns. Planets were sending unauthorized messages. Species were talking to each other without permission. These humans are a virus, he declared. They corrupt everything they touch with their chaos. We must contain them before they destroy everything we have built. But deep down, HFY feared it was already too late. The humans had brought something to the galaxy that was more contagious than any disease, the idea that things could be different. The war began with an ultimatum that Admiral HFY thought would end the human problem once and for all. Attention human vessels, he broadcast across the galaxy. You have 30 standard days to cease all unauthorized contact with Concordat species. You will submit to classification and accept your assigned role, or you will be removed from our territory by force. The response came from Admiral Juan, the human captain who had somehow been promoted to lead Earth's growing fleet. Her message was broadcast on every frequency the Concordat used, reaching every world in their empire. Admiral HFY, she said, her voice calm but filled with steel. You want to know what humans are? We're the species that looked at an endless ocean and decided to sail across it, or the ones who saw mountains and decided to climb them. We looked at the sky and decided to fly. We've been breaking impossible rules since we learned to walk. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of history. We've faced down kings and emperors, gods and demons. We've survived ice ages and plagues, wars and disasters. And we've never, not once, accepted being told what we can and cannot do. So if you think your perfect little system is going to contain us, you don't know humans at all. The Concordat expected a traditional war. They had the largest fleet in galactic history, with ships that could destroy entire star systems. Their battle formations had been perfected over centuries. Their strategies, tested against 1,000 different enemies. They outnumbered the human ships by more than 1,000 to 1. But the humans didn't fight the war the Concordat expected. Instead of attacking military targets, human ships appeared at farming worlds and mining colonies. Captain Minho landed on the Zephyrian world of Atmosia, where the blue-skinned aliens had been processing atmospheres for hostile planets for over 1,000 years. You know, he said to the Zephyrian workers, you could use these same skills to fix dead worlds and make them into homes for your own people. Why are you making gardens for others when you could be making them for yourselves? The Zephyrian supervisor, a being named Velcora, looked confused. This is our assignment. We process atmospheres for the hegemony. It is our function. But who decided that? Minho asked. Did you choose this job, or were you just told to do it? Velcora had never been asked this question before. We were assigned this role because we are skilled at atmospheric work. Right, but what if you used those skills for your own benefit? What if you found empty worlds and turned them into Zephyrian colonies? What if you worked for yourselves instead of for others? The idea was revolutionary. Within days, Zephyrian workers were abandoning their assigned projects and beginning to transform dead worlds into new homes for their own species. Engineer. Sora was doing the same thing with the Corvan computer workers. She showed them how their incredible analytical abilities could be used to solve problems they cared about, not just the calculations assigned by their masters. You're brilliant, she told a young Corvan named Zix42. You could cure diseases, design new technologies, explore the mysteries of the universe. Why are you wasting your intelligence on tax calculations for the hegemony, the Concordat's military? Leaders were baffled. Their enemy wasn't attacking them directly. They were stealing their workforce by giving them better ideas. When the hegemony's perfect battle fleets finally engaged the human ships, nothing went according to plan. The humans ignored every rule of space combat, used improvised weapons, fought in chaotic formations, employed strategies that made no sense until they suddenly worked. Admiral Keth Va watched in horror as his perfectly organized fleet was outmaneuvered by ships that should have been easy targets. Human vessels appeared where they were impossible to be, using tactics that contradicted every military manual ever written. How are they doing this? He demanded of his tactical officers. Admiral, they're not following any recognized battle patterns, replied Commander Yuthka. They retreat when they should advance, attack when they should defend, and split their forces when they should concentrate. It's completely illogical. But it's working, Kethvia said bitterly. The human ships were outnumbered 1,000 to 1. But they kept winning battles they had no right to win. They used asteroids as weapons, turned cargo ships into missile platforms, and somehow convinced enemy vessels to switch sides in the middle of battles. The most frustrating part was that the humans weren't even trying to conquer territory. They were fighting for something much more dangerous. They were fighting for ideas. Every battle they won, every world they visited, more species learned about human concepts like freedom, choice, and self-determination. Captain Haiyan Wu's small fleet liberated an entire star system not by destroying the Concordat forces, but by convincing them that they didn't have to follow orders from beings who had never asked for their consent to rule. You know, he told the Vec workers on Mining Station 7, back on Earth, we have a saying, the best way to defeat an enemy is to make them your friend. We don't want to conquer you. We want to free you. And once you're free, you can choose. What do you want to do with your lives? The Vec workers, who had been experiencing individual consciousness for the first time thanks to human influence, looked at each other with their compound eyes. We can choose? Of course you can choose. That's what freedom means, the right to decide your own destiny. Admiral Kethve realized with growing horror that he was losing a war against an enemy that refused to fight it properly. The humans were winning not through superior firepower, but through superior ideas. And ideas, he was learning, were much harder to destroy than starships. The end came faster than anyone expected. 18 months after the first human ship had appeared at the edge of Concordat space, the greatest civilization in galactic history simply fell apart. Not because of massive battles or destroyed fleets, but because the beings within it decided they didn't want to be part of it anymore. Admiral Kethve stood in his crystal command chamber, watching his empire crumble on the displays around him. Red warning lights flashed as world after world declared independence. The Zephyrians had formed their own atmospheric engineering company. The Corvin had created something they called the Free-Thinking Collective. Even some of the deck had started individual colonies where they could explore their new personal identities. Admiral, his aide Sekeni reported, her voice shaking. The Hegemony Council is demanding we take immediate action. They want us to threaten the rebel worlds with destruction. Kethve closed his ancient eyes. Send the message. Tell them that any world harboring human chaos will be destroyed. The threat was broadcast across the galaxy. For a moment, Kethve thought it might work. Fear had always been a powerful tool for maintaining order. But instead of submission, something unprecedented happened. 12 different species, from 12 different star systems, all sent the same message at exactly the same time. We reject the hegemony's authority. We stand with the humans and with freedom. Within hours, they had formed defensive alliances. The Zephyrians promised to create atmospheric shields for rebel worlds. The Corvin offered their computational skills to coordinate defenses. The Vec, despite their recent individual awakening, agreed to work together to protect their new freedom. Kethve's fleet, once the most powerful force in the galaxy, suddenly faced enemies on all sides. His perfect order was collapsing, not from external attack, but from internal revolution. The final confrontation came when Admiral Juwan's flagship approached Kethve's command station. She requested a private communication, and despite everything, the old admiral accepted. You've destroyed everything, Kethve said, his crystalline features dim with exhaustion. 3,000 years of peace, of order, of progress. Billions of beings knew their place, understood their purpose, lived in harmony. What have you gained by destroying all of that? Admiral Giwan looked at him through the communication screen. Her face was tired but determined. Admiral, we've gained something you never had. The right to be wrong, to fail, to try again, and to choose our own path. Your order was perfect. I'll give you that, but that was its weakness. Weakness, Kethve's voice rose. Our system worked flawlessly for millennia. It worked because it never allowed anything new to happen, Juwan replied. But life isn't about perfection. It's about growth, change, making mistakes, and learning from them. Your perfect order was really just a perfect prison. She leaned forward. Our chaos is flawed, unpredictable, and absolutely unstoppable. And now, for the first time in 3,000 years, every species in this galaxy gets to decide what they want to become. The aftermath was indeed chaotic. Wars broke out between former Concordat members as old grudges surfaced. Some species struggled with concepts of individual choice, having lived under assigned roles for so long. Others embraced freedom so enthusiastically that they had to learn how to govern themselves from scratch. The galaxy became louder, messier, more dangerous than it had been in millennia. But it also became more alive. Captain Minsu found himself mediating disputes between newly independent worlds. Look, he told a group of arguing alien representatives, nobody said freedom was easy. Democracy is messy, choice is complicated, and sometimes you're going to make mistakes. But those are your mistakes to make. The humans established something they called the Galactic Council, but it was nothing like the old hegemony. Instead of rulers, they became mediators and protectors of one simple principle. Every species had the right to determine its own destiny. The Council's charter was written in a way that would have horrified the Concordat's founders. It was messy, contradictory, and included provisions for its own amendment or even dissolution. It allowed for disagreement, debate, and change. It was, in other words, perfectly human engineer Sora helped establish the new council's headquarters on a neutral world. No, she said to her alien colleagues. Back on Earth, we have a saying the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. This council isn't here to rule anyone. It's here to make sure nobody else tries to rule everyone. Years passed. The galaxy settled into its new chaotic rhythm. Young beings across the stars learned about the time before the chaos, when everything was ordered and predictable. Most of them couldn't understand how anyone could have preferred such a life. Why would anyone want to live without choices? Asked a young Zephyrian student during one of Captain Jihoon's history lessons. Jihoon smiled. Because choice is scary. It means you might fail. You might make mistakes. You might have to take responsibility for your decisions. But it also means you get to be yourself, to dream your own dreams, to build your own future. He looked out at the stars, where thousands of species were now following their own paths. We humans learned long ago that a chaotic life filled with possibilities is better than a perfect life filled with limitations. And now the whole galaxy gets to learn that lesson too. The galaxy would never be the same. Ships moved in unpredictable patterns, carrying traders and explorers and dreamers. New colonies sprouted on empty worlds. Art and music and stories flowed between species in ways the old order had never allowed. And that, as humanity had proven, was exactly the point.